back to Hail Victor. I'm your host, Theo. And today, back with us, has been here since preseason, is Jesse. What's up?
Thanks for having me on once again, Theo. Appreciate it.
And we're going to be talking about our disaster class again against the Seahawks.
Yeah, it's getting to be a theme here. Every week we dig ourselves deeper and deeper in our division, and every week our chances of hopes of making the playoffs seems to get dimmer and dimmer.
Yeah, it gets worse and worse every week with this deficit. We started off 28-0 in the first half. Final first half score, just in the first half, not even the whole game, was 31-7. If we had won, it would have been one of the greatest comebacks of all time. But obviously, our players did not play well enough for us to come anywhere near. And I wanted to talk about drive number one on offense. Our big issue was blocking.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme here. The offensive line just can't get it done. I know there have been injuries. I know Sam Cosmi was back in the lineup against Seattle this week, but it didn't seem to help much. Right out of the gate, the very first drive, like you said, the first series, Jaden is running for his life in the first handful of plays.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't even get back there and plant his leg after his drop back.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's not that Jaden Daniels is just working. It's not that Jaden Daniels is just following the play call. It's not like this is all how it's drawn out. This is raw Jaden Daniels material right there with the O-line. There's terrible blocking. We can't run the ball, so we have to pass it. And nobody's getting open, so Jaden just has to take off. And it's all him every time, and we just don't have a shot if that's how it's going to be, especially with him out now.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure we'll get to that injury. Obviously, that's going to be a franchise-altering injury potentially, but we'll get to that later in the show. But I guess I got to disagree with you a little bit, Theo. I placed at least the opening couple of drives on the offensive coordinator. If your first 3, 4, 5 plays are dropbacks when you got Ja'Cory Merritt back there, when you got Bill back there, he doesn't get any touches. You're going to dig yourself in a hole. Then you get down 14-0, 21-0, and then you can't run the ball. But I'd like to see that right off the bat. If this offensive line can't pass protect, then they can smash and step out and just see if we can run the ball. I mean, Bill hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 1, if I recall, and I think he did okay against the Bears. But the last 3 games, he hasn't done much at all. And I don't know how much of that is on him versus not providing him with the opportunities early in the game before we get down to see if we can get a running game going.
Yeah. And like you said, that just kind of set a theme when we didn't get out in front at the start. And really, that just messed us up the whole game. We couldn't get anything going. Defensive first drive, our first defensive drive, obviously 7-0 isn't much of a deficit. But that whole drive at that point, they were still tearing through our defense. Our defense made some terrible plays. Marshawn Lattimore in particular drew multiple flags. And could not play coverage, which we all know. I've talked about him before, and we all know I mentioned that he is very old, and frankly, we should trade him for at least some draft picks, maybe a decent player. And we were letting up huge plays passing, and Kenneth Walker was running all over us, and there was just nothing we could stop.
Yeah, I share the same views on Lattimore. I think he's a liability back there in the secondary, and you've got guys running free left and right anywhere that Sam Darnold looks down. I mean, you make Sam Darnold look like Joe Montana. That's on you as a defense. That's not him being some sort of transcendent great quarterback. If you can't get pressure on him and your coverage is terrible in the secondary, you're going to get carved up, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, and in the first half, obviously Sam Darnold is like a good quarterback as of last season, and this season he's a pretty good quarterback. As of now, they're 6-2 already, good record. But if we're being honest, there are so many way better quarterbacks that did not have that stat line. After just the first half right now, 16 of 16, 282 yards, and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, again, you dig yourself a hole like that, it's very difficult to get out of. And I think that when you get down that early and your defense gives up those kind of points and your offense stalls out on its drives, then you start to get desperate and it starts to compound the mistakes. So, for example, you see Jaden, who normally is a great decision maker, he's under pressure and he throws the ball up for
Third
grabs
and
yeah,
17.
that gets picked. He doesn't throw that ball up for grabs if the score's 10-7 or 7-0 or even 10-0. When you're down by that many and you're a playmaker and you know that the offense rests on your shoulders, you're going to try and force things.
Especially when no one else is making plays. And like you said, Bill didn't get the chance, so it's all up to Jaden at that
Yeah.
point. And
And
it's
his
like all that's on his shoulders. And he always says he doesn't like to feel the pressure, but
well, you can't help but feel some of it when
yeah,
your number one receiver is out intermittently and throughout most of the season. And so without McLaurin out there, he's looking at Debo, and as good as I think Debo is, they haven't developed a chemistry over a number of years. He's new to the team. He didn't get to play last year on our squad, obviously, and without that 1-2 punch at wideout, it's they can feel free to double or cheat someone over on top of Debo, and so puts a lot of pressure on Daniels, and you'll see that he looks over and over again for Zach Ertz,
yeah,
who's having great games, wonderful hands, he's having a real resurgence late in his career, but you can't live and die by throwing to a tight end 15 times a
yeah.
game.
And also, it's like, tight ends usually don't get the chance, which sucks because should Zach Ertz get a much better chance in this league if it were based off tight ends, we wouldn't be this terrible. I wouldn't say we'd be one of the best, but Zach Ertz, even at his age, still has good hands and he's still making plays for us, especially with our wide receivers out. We still have Noah Brown out. No one mentions that, but it leads to us signing practice squad receivers, and a lot of this stuff is just off broken plays that Jaden is making. So our whole offense is based off of that at this point, and that's really not okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking of the last time we had me on the show in the preseason, and we were talking about Terry McLaurin holding out and would he come back? And he's reaching that magic number at age 30, where guys start to get older at the skill positions. And I think I mentioned back then that I know it's not sexy. I know it's not the biggest thing that makes all the highlights, but sometimes you just got to worry about your O line and your D line, and the games are
Yeah,
won and lost in the trenches. And I kind of looking at that now. Here we are at 3-6, and the main problem is we can't get protection for our quarterback. We lose our top quarterback, which again we'll get into, and we can't stop another team's offense, which means we can't get pressure on their quarterback, which is a D line thing. We can't stop the run, which is a D line thing. You have to get through that front four first, and you know, I think maybe looking back on things now, maybe the idea was that we shouldn't have re-signed Terry, and we should have taken that money and put it into our lines, or even tried to engineer some sort of trade. But hindsight is 2020. But we have to live with this for the rest of the season and figure it out going forward.
yeah. And then going back to the defensive side, we really didn't get much of a head start on that. But I wanted to talk about Marshawn Lattimore and just our cornerback coverage in general. We played terrible this game. We had Torrey Horton absolutely destroying us. We had Cody White with his first NFL touchdown, a 60-yarder. Um, and really, our DBs and cornerbacks were just playing terrible. And I know, like you said, it all starts with the defensive line because if we can't pressure the quarterback, they have so much time to throw. But
Yeah.
at the same time, the defensive line can only do so much because a lot of it wasn't even like he had so much time in the pocket. Sometimes it was also just, our DBs just couldn't make a play and their receivers were tearing through. And I know the Seahawks have a good receiver in Jackson Smith-Njigba, JSN, who is one of the best receivers in the league. But at the same time, we had Torrey Horton, who's a rookie right now, working against veteran Marshawn Lattimore and working against Mikey Sanders still. We had Trey Amos in there. All of them were getting beat, and that leads me to a one touchdown where Mikey Sanders still supposed to be locked up one-on-one with Torrey Horton, and Torrey Horton just beats him to a corner route for an easy touchdown.
Yeah, no, you make some good points, and that's true. Not all of them were just Darnold having all this time back there and the coverage breaking down eventually. I think you're right. Sometimes he just drop back and in a 3 or 5 step drop, he hits that last foot and he just fires it off. And these guys are open by a mile in the secondary. It's not all on the D line. So you're right about that. I think, like I said, Lattimore needs to be replaced as soon as possible. The other D backs I'm not super impressed with. I think part of and I'm not making excuses. They're getting beat athletically one on
Yeah.
one. But I will say, Trey Amos, you got to give him.
Rookie.
Yeah, he's a rookie. You got to give him a little bit of leeway. That move that we saw JSN put on was sick, double, triple move right
Yeah.
out of it. It's hard to do that, but I think part of what's going on, and this is about modern football, and I'm older than you, and I grew up watching football when it was a little bit different. This secondary, what they don't have in athleticism, they could make up for in physicality, but things are getting called really, really tight. So, for example, you look at Trey Amos when we got beat off of that. Would love to see him get his hands all over that receiver or play inside leverage or get more physical, but he's playing him straight up and he's not getting his hands out there. I don't know how much of that is fear of getting called, but then the other thing is Frankie Louvu, who's a favorite of mine. I know you like him too.
Yeah.
Not the best guy in the world, but he's physical as all heck. And they're taking that away from him. This is, like you pointed out to me, this is the second week in a row that he got called for a hip drop tackle, which, again, because I'm an old head, I didn't even know what it was. We had to look it up, and we're watching the plays. This is his second one. I know he got fined in excess of $40,000 last week, and I think he said he's suspended now. So this is tough going. What Louvu maybe lacks in discipline, he makes up for in aggressiveness. And you always want, at the end of the day, you want someone who can hit. You want someone who's out there being physical, who's intimidating the offense, the receivers. They're taking that away from him. This hip drop tackle stuff is out of order. I was with it when they changed the horse collar tackle rule. I agreed with that. Targeting, I agree with that. But this hip drop stuff, if you watch those highlights, if you watch him making the tackle, he's diving to make a play, and the rest of his body gets whipped around as the runner, as the receiver moves him and keeps going. So I kind of think it was a ticky-tack call. But, when you're already getting beat and you can't even rely on getting a little bit handsy, then it's going to look real, real bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it does look really bad, especially because I see you brought it up. I was going to mention that our worst play of the game officially, easily, another rookie, Arayo, I believe it was, scores his first touchdown, and I wouldn't say he was exactly wide open, but he pretty easily beat him, and just about any quarterback could have hit him in the end zone for a touchdown. And on top of that, at the same time, should he have not been open, for whatever reason, you look at the other side of the field and you see Amos locked up in one-on-one coverage. Jackson Smith and Jigga fakes going deep and then fakes going short a couple times with a little stutter step to Trey Amos. And Amos just completely falls behind and JSN's wide open. And, working against the best receivers in the league, I know you said we got to give him some leeway, but at the same time, obviously there's not much of a shot of us making the playoffs, but any given Sunday, and if that's going to be the case, we have to lock in. And even if he's going to progress, he's going to have to learn how to match up with some of the best receivers in the league, and he's going to have to learn to play on them.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't even know how much of it is even dreaming about a playoff spot at this point. I think you have to really take an assessment of where you are as a franchise and as a team this season. And I think the reality is, and we talked about this off camera a little bit, Theo, this team played out of their minds last year. They played over their heads. They won, I don't know how many games, 5 or 6 games. No, they won 12 overall, but 5 or 6 games by a score or less. And it's at least several of those on last-second plays. So
same thing for the ones they lost too.
Right. So almost all of their games could have gone either way. To me, that means you get stuck with a really tough schedule, right? And the next year, all of a sudden, all of those breaks that went your way, maybe they don't all go your way. And this year, they're breaking the other way. I think it really reveals that and unfortunately, even though we are diehards here, it reveals that they were not as good as we thought they were, right? And now what happens is you're going to have to struggle with this super tough schedule as one of the best 4 teams in the league last year, even though you overachieved. So now you compound that problem with a bunch of injuries, silly mistakes, bad coaching moves, poor decisions on the field, guys holding out. So it's just a perfect storm this season in the worst way.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with what you're saying. But you know what it also might prove? It also might prove that this year maybe we got a little bit cocky. And I think coming out of a strong season last year where we were able to come back for multiple games and win some that we probably weren't expected to win. And even the ones we lost were, I think, maybe one of them was not close. If not 2, maybe 3. But overall, most of the games we lost were super close, and I think we got a little bit cocky saying, with all this new talent we can do it, and I think it really just goes to show, we didn't really show up this year, especially, like you said, having a harder schedule. This is the year we have to ball out. Every year you have to ball out even harder as we get better and better. But I think this year it just didn't go our way.
Yeah, there's still a shot. Again, I came up during the Joe Gibbs era, the best, hands down, the best coach that this franchise has ever had, and he often would get into December and he would make a run in December. He'd go undefeated in December or win 4 or 5 games. And, I still hold out hope for stuff like that. You can make a run as long as you start beating your divisional opponents. And we still have the Eagle. We still have a lot of teams on the schedule here before this thing is over. So you never know. Wild card berth is the dream at this point. The first things first, though. I didn't know if you wanted to get into the big injury yet.
Yeah, I kind of want to hold off on that
Okay.
for now. I just wanted to talk about, a lot of this episode has been negative. We've been talking about how much we messed up, how much, we might be screwed for the rest of the season. But I would like to talk about maybe some positive things before we go into the Jaden injury. I wanted to start with Mikey Sam was still interception, so it wasn't all bad. He got beat a lot. So did our DBs in general, but it was a great interception. It was a very low pass. He dove for it. Even should it have been high, I think it would have at minimum been an incomplete pass. It was a great play by him. But it didn't all work out in the end. One thing, here's a little prediction here. One thing I really want to talk about would be trade possibilities for quarterbacks. I know Jaden's done for the season.
Well, wait, before we get into trade possibilities, I just wanted to chime in with my positive stuff real quick. I got to go with Zach Ertz. Ever since he came here from Philly, he has showed up and showed out week in and week out. He's been the go-to target for Jaden from last year, carrying on even into early this year. He just always finds a way to get open. He's got incredible hands, just really sticky hands. And for an old guy, I know he's in his mid-30s, 34, 35 years old. He's really playing out of his mind right now. This is sort of a renaissance for him. So, and I know with Mariota now is going to come in and finish out the season.
Yeah.
He's a capable backup. We don't want him to start this many games, but I think he'll be able to find Ertz, on occasion and keep it going. So that's my bright spot.
But before I move on to Jaden injury, I did also want to say special teams issues. I used to bring this up a lot. We had a lot of special teams issues. This week, there were a couple bad plays. Jalen Lane on a kick return barely got hit on the arm and lost the football. You just got to learn to protect that. And I know he was
especially when you're down.
Yeah, you're down by a lot.
You're down by a lot. You better, and you've already had turnovers. Oh man, you got to protect it. He just runs up there carelessly with one arm on it, and it gets swatted right out of him. Just no awareness of where he is situationally.
I think what he was looking to do was make a big play downfield by just bursting through. Yep. But in reality, you got to protect the ball because it's more important if you take it out to the touchback, but hold on to your ball, and the team has a chance to go down the field and score than it is for you to try to bust free and score a touchdown, and then there's a 1% chance you break free and a 99% chance you fumble because that really hurt us a lot more. But, only so much we can argue for.
Yeah.
But Jaden Daniels' injury, that was a huge one. Jaden just rolls over while getting sacked and tries to stick out his arm to break his fall. He should have just taken it. I mean, I guess hindsight, like you said, hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
But this wasn't really much wrong with what he was doing, just trying to break his fall too much. But really, you just got to tuck it and just take the sack. Then you can get up. He put his arm out, his elbow bent, and there you go, dislocated.
Yeah, I know we haven't heard the results of the MRI yet. All we've been told is that it's a dislocated elbow and that he's out indefinitely. I have to assume, based on what I saw, that he's at least done for the season. We don't know what the rest of his career looks like. I know it's not his throwing arm. That's really the only saving grace here is that it's not his legs. He uses those a ton to create openings, and it's not his throwing arm. So can he come back from it? Yeah, I think so. Is he going to be the same?
No.
Physically, he might be the same, but I'm telling you, having lived through RG3 and Joe Theismann and all of these guys historically, they're not the same if they can come back. mentally it messes you up. So especially a guy who's making the play, running around on broken plays and putting himself and his body at risk. I
Yeah.
don't know how anxious he's going to be to do that going forward. I think a big problem here is they haven't been able to. The problem is that he generates offense that way and he helps the team. So I don't know how much the team, even though they pay lip service to saying, "Hey, don't take unnecessary risks, stay in the pocket, throw here, only roam." Like they're trying to protect him, but at the same time, I think they realized he's a large part of their offense when he runs those
Yeah.
broken plays. He doesn't get you what you want sitting back there in the pocket, being a quote unquote normal quarterback. But that's a double edged sword. He's not a huge guy. He's not a big guy like what's his from Philly.
Jalen Hurts,
He's
yeah.
not. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a load. When he takes off, he's looking to deliver a blow. When Jaden takes off, you're holding your breath, waiting to see what happens and if he's going to be okay. He's a slight guy. He's only 180-ish pounds, something like
Yeah.
that. The injury itself looks awful, and I know I've read about and heard a lot of people placing that blame on the head coach. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. What did
Okay, so the idea is this: they were up by I don't know how many touchdowns.
should have put Mariota
There's
in?
7.5 minutes left in the game. You're not going to win. Why do you have him out there? He's coming off two different
Yeah.
injuries. He's been out with a bunch of different injuries this season already. Take care of your star player, your franchise player. Don't put him in unnecessary danger. Let's pull him out. That's why you have a
Yeah.
backup.
And if you watch the highlights and you don't know what happened, you see Mariota come in, and at first you just assume like, oh, well, yeah, they're down by 30 something points, might as well. But then you see the actual play and you see Jaden Daniels injured,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my God! And if you saw, his elbow was not at a good angle.
No, this was again. I lived through watching the Joe Theismann break his leg in half on Monday Night Football against the Giants. This was very close to being as brutal and graphic as that was. It's not something you want to watch if you have a weak heart. But I will say this: so Mariota is going to finish out, and the rest of the season, we're not sure how it goes. But I mean, this is really a negative way to look at it. But if Mariota is gonna not do that well and they're going to lose a bunch of these rest of the games, it at least puts us in a position in the offseason for a high draft pick, in a position to sort of bolster the roster, which is clear we do need to bolster the roster. I think last year was a bit of an illusion. You overachieved that much, everything, the ball bounces your way. And now we're looking at the flip side to that coin where everything goes against you. So it's tough. Jaden is a super strong, cool dude. He walked off on his own power, which I think he wanted to do. For himself and for his fans. And I know the rest of the team loves him and appreciates him. He'll be back. We'll see him at some point. The rest of the season, though, we just got to see what we can get out of this with Mariota at the helm.
I got a little bit of a prediction here. Quarterback trades. I think we're gonna go to the Brown, or at least I would. Maybe we won't because we're gonna trust Mariota here. But if I'm making the decisions, if I were to make decisions in the franchise, I go straight to the Browns. They have so many quarterbacks. I take Shador Sanders, who it seemed like nobody wanted. Really in the draft, he fell all the way to the fifth round, which is ridiculous because at one point he's projected to go top 5.
Right.
And really, I would go and try to trade for maybe him, try to trade for maybe Dylan Gabriel. We need some good quarterback, and even if it's not a good quarterback, so I need someone young, and that would really work out for us, at least until Jaden gets back.
I hear what you're saying, and I would love to have another young quarterback on the roster as well. I don't think they're looking at that right now. I think all their eggs are in the basket for Jaden, even coming back in the offseason. But I have a question for you. What do you think they should do, if anything, about Dan Quinn at head coach?
Personally, I would keep him because I feel like he's a good head coach, and maybe he's not having the best season so far. But I feel like a lot of the time, it really goes back to the players' athleticism, because I feel like a lot of our players have good enough talent to fit with the play call, and a lot of the time we just get beat and we don't make decisions. That's as a defense, and on offense. A lot of the time it's just skill, like you were saying before. Offensive line could not block, and I don't think that's not a play calling issue.
Yeah.
That's Jaden having to scramble for his life because they can't do anything. That's our receivers not getting open. I don't think that's a play calls thing. Sometimes the routes can be play call things where you kind of play into their coverage, but at the same time, like, it's skill a lot of the time. It's skill. So,
all right, that's a good point.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Come from the past, move to the wind, changing our name, strong from within. The name that we have is the name that we need. Seeking our enemies, watching them bleed, fighting like a warrior, living in charge, victory gang.